Hey guys, it's me, Miss Mills, and the whole point of this video is to help you distinguish between rational and irrational numbers, okay? So let's first get into rational numbers. What is a rational number, and how do you know if a number is a rational number? So let's go ahead and get started. So the big thing about rational numbers, let me write it out again, rational numbers, is that we have to focus on this little part about it right here. That says ratio. If you can turn a number into a ratio, which is a fancy word for a fraction, that means that that number is a rational number. So rational numbers includes decimal numbers that can be terminated. So for example, 0.5 would be a rational number because first off, you can turn this into a fraction. 5/10 is the same thing as 1/2. So you also know that it has to be a rational number in that way because you can turn this into a fraction. A rational number, an example would be repeating decimals. So let's say 0.3 repeating can be turned into a fraction. It would be 1/3. So repeating decimals are also rational numbers. So rational numbers also include negative numbers. So -12 would be a rational number because you can take any whole number and turn it into a fraction as well. -12 can be turned into -12/1. Any other whole number, like let's say 3, can be turned into a ratio or a fraction as well by putting a 1 under that as well. So all of these are examples of rational numbers, okay? So again, rational numbers is any number that you can turn into a ratio or a fraction, okay? And that includes, again, decimals that end, repeating decimals, whole numbers, and perfect squares. I forgot to get into this too. Guys, let's go back to what we went over last week about perfect squares. If y'all remember what a perfect square was, it was when you square root a number and the answer is a whole number. Another way to think about it is this way. If you take a number and you multiply it by itself, the answer will be a perfect square. For example, if you take a number and you're going to square it, so if you take a number and you multiply it by itself, the answer is always going to be a perfect square, okay? So again, if you square root the answer to that, so if you square root 49, the answer is going to be 7, which is a whole number. So that means a perfect square is always going to be a rational number, okay? Let's get into irrational numbers again. So an irrational number is any number that cannot be turned into a fraction. So let me give you some examples of an irrational number. Rational numbers. For example, one of the most famous irrational numbers is going to be this funny looking number right here. That is called pi. Okay, pi is the most famous irrational number in the world. And let me show you what I'm talking about real quick. So we can go to our Desmos calculator, and if you put in pi, it'll give you this answer right here. Guys, pi is one of those numbers that goes on forever. It is a decimal number that literally has no end. So it's an irrational number. Another example of an irrational number would be taking the square root of any number that's not a perfect square. So let's say 30. 30 is not a perfect square because you can't multiply a number by itself and get 30. So if you put that into your calculator, so let's go back to our Desmos calculator, we can put in the square root of 30. So let me just clear this, the square root of 30. The same thing, you get a number, a decimal number that goes on forever, and there is no repeating there either. It is a number that goes on forever, it is non-terminating, and it is non-repeating. Those are examples of irrational numbers. So if you go, so that was like 5 point something. Another example of an irrational number would be if you see this on a quiz or a test or something, it would say something like 0.1237. If you see these 3 little dots, behind a decimal number, that means that that keeps going. That means that that is an irrational number if it is not repeating. However, if you see this 0.45 and you see the repeating sign over it, as well as dots, that means it's 0.45454545. It goes on forever, but it is a repeating decimal. Also, you can turn it into a fraction. So that means that repeating decimals, even if you see the 3 dots and you know it goes on forever, they're still going to be a rational number. So let's go back and review again. Rational numbers are any numbers that you can turn into a fraction. They include terminating decimals, repeating decimals, and perfect squares, and whole numbers and negative numbers and all the stuff like that. Irrational numbers is a lot smaller number chart. Irrational numbers include, well, pi, non-terminating decimals, non-repeating decimals, and non-perfect squares. Guys, if you have any questions, remember to contact me. I hope this video helps. It's a beautiful day, and I can't wait to see y'all again. See ya.